Hi there, hope you're well. This video is shamelessly all about the 10-minute workshop Loose Tenon Jig. If you don't know the story, about 6 months ago I put out a video about a DIY loose tenon jig, a DIY domino jig. That video's done really well, had about 120,000 views in the last 6 months, and it's literally taken that long to get a commercial flat-packed CNC'd version of that jig into production. It is finally into production, but unfortunately nobody's going to be able to buy it because the first production run is completely spoken for. YouTube members and Patreon supporters get first dibs at all these kinds of things, as well as discounts. So unfortunately for everybody else, the first run is completely gone. You can put your name down on a list and register an interest for the second production run, which has been put in hand, but I don't have an actual ETA on that yet. In fact, I don't have the final production units yet at the time of making this video. Fingers crossed they'll be in my hands by the time this video goes live. Rather than me just blather on about how great this jig is, I'm just going to make a simple carcass, a simple cabinet with it, and I'll fill you in on some of the details as we go. The jig comes flat packed in two parts that need to be joined to make an L shape and can be fixed together just with glue, with nails or with screws. If you want to be able to break the jig down again, then it's best to use threaded inserts. There's a pair of these included in the starter pack, more on that later. And here I'm just using M4 machine screws to fix the two halves together. The jig is designed with 1/4 inch routers in mind, and I fitted an 18mm guide brush to the router and centered it with a mandrel. Then fitted a 5mm spiral upcut bit. It helps with dust extraction. There's one included in the starter kit. And I've set the plunge depth using the notch at the end of the jig. That notch has another function too that we'll come to later. I'm marking out on the cabinet where I want the loose tenons to go, and the only ones that really need to be measured are the mid-panel mortises. All the others will be referenced off the pins that are included with the jig. The top and base are identical, but the shelf is set back from the front edge, so any marks need to be referenced from the back edge. And here I'm transferring the positions from the shelf mortises onto the cabinet sides. I'm starting with the wider mortises on the inside face of the cabinet. The larger face of the jig has wider slots, and just letting the reference pins set the position against the workpiece edge. A couple of clamps and I can cut the first mortise. And then the second, again just referenced off the edge using the pins. For the centre mortise, I can line up the jig's centre line against the pencil mark, then route the slot, and continue onto the other end of the cabinet, then repeat the process on the other cabinet side. Base and shelf next, and I'm using the small face of the jig to cut a tight mortise on the edges, again using the reference pins against the edge to give me the position. And then the centre line lined up against a pencil mark, and then the other side again with the pins. Mid-panel mortise and the cabinet next for the shelf, and there are a couple of ways we can go here. One is to deconstruct the jig, the benefits of flat pack, though it will still work just by flipping the jig over, and use the loose tenons in the shelf to reference the notch in the jig, just like you do with dowel jigs. And for the center mortise, you can simply screw the jig down. Any holes are covered by the shelf or mid panel that you're connecting. The other option shown here is to just bear the jig against a reference edge and use the pins or pencil marks to locate the mortises, though care should always be taken as to which edge you're referencing, just saying. So that's the machining done. I did make a couple of schoolboy errors on the shelf mortises. On one side I referenced off the edge of the cabinet instead of the pencil mark, and then compounded the error by working off the edge of the shelf instead of the pencil mark. So that's not a reflection on the jig, that's just me having too much on my mind. I'm going to slap this together with a bit of glue and some 5x30 dominoes, and while I do that, let me answer a few questions, obvious questions that I'm sure will have occurred to you along the way. So why 5x30mm dominoes? Well, because Festool don't make a 6x30. 30mm dominoes are great to use because it's the same plunge depth for face and edge mortises in 18mm material. Festool make it really easy to change the plunge depth on the domino. So using, say, a 6x40mm domino, you can switch between a 15mm plunge on the face and a 25mm plunge on the edge. But even so, I've managed to get it wrong enough times that I just switched to using 5x30s, and I've built literally thousands of carcasses that way without any issues whatsoever. It's also much harder to switch between plunge depths with a router. You'd have to preset it on the turret, and even then you may not have enough plunge depth on your particular router. These smaller palm routers often only have a 35mm plunge that's usable, so take 25mm off that for the domino and 12mm for the jig, and you're already out of that range. So will it work on thinner stock? Yes, though the jig is set up for 18mm thick material, you can use it on 15mm or 12mm stock by using shims or packers on the inside face. Again though, you run into niggles with the dominoes and plunge depth. For 12mm, you really want a consistent 10mm plunge, so if you're using a 5x30mm domino, you either need a safe way to cut the domino down to 20mm, or switch to 4x20mm dominoes, which presents other niggles like getting a long enough 4mm upcut bit to fit your collet. The alternative would be for getting a 20mm plunge from your router, bearing in mind that you've added a 3mm shim to the base. You'll already be right at the limit with a lot of these smaller palm routers. Will it work on thicker stock? Yes, but the dominoes won't be centered. On the Festool domino, one of the main gripes initially was the lack of an 18mm setting on the fence. Most folks, including myself, just use the 20mm setting, and it worked just fine with a slightly offset domino, so you'll have no issues at all with 22 or 25mm. If you start getting up to 32mm, then maybe consider the double domino where you put one in from each side. So that's not looking too bad. It's all clamped up nicely and has gone together very well, nice and tight on the edges, which is what we really want. To be honest, in a carcass of this size, it's only about 380mm deep. I probably normally just use 2 dominoes. I've used 3 because I wanted to show how easy it is to handle mid-panel mortises, just working off pencil marks. And I guess the final question is, when can you buy one and what do they cost? Well, as I said at the start, the first production run is already spoken for and the second has been put in hand. Feel free to add your name to the list to be notified when they're available. As to that price, my idea all along was to try and get something together for about 1/10 of the price of a Festool domino. That would make it around £75. I haven't managed that. I've actually done a little bit better. The jig is available in 3 bundles. The jig on its own is £45. You can add a starter pack to that contains enough 30mm, 5x30mm dominoes to make a couple of carcasses and a few mistakes. There's a really nice solid carbide 5mm spiral upcut bit from Rennie Tools in there, and a pair of M4 threaded inserts to make the jig flat packable, and that bundle with the jig will set you back 65 quid. And finally, there's all of that plus a Trend 18mm guide bush, and that package comes in at £74. Shipping and handling on those is £5 within the UK and £10 for the rest of the world. I'm going to leave it there though before I turn this into the 10-minute workshop shopping channel. Might be too late. Thank you ever so much for taking a look. Thank you as always to my amazing channel members on Patreon and YouTube who've lived through the difficult birth of this jig over the last 6 months or so. You folks have endless patience and I really appreciate you helping me to keep things ticking along here. But that's it for this one. Thanks for taking a look and I'll see you in the next one. All right, take care.